Right, welcome everyone. Assalamu alaikum. And we are so blessed and honored to have our dear speaker, Chaplain Sondos Kholaki today, who's going to be talking about spiritual health. We're conducting a wellness challenge throughout the month of February. Some of you are participating. We have over 30 participants with different age groups from all over the country participating. So it's a pleasure and honor to see the engagement people are sharing. So thank you everyone who is a part of that. And those who are not, you still get to experience these great talks that we bring in some very qualified and esteemed speakers. So dear friend, and an honor to have Chaplain Sondos Kholaki. She's a board certified chaplain who has served in the hospital, police, and community settings. She has earned a Master of Divinity degree in Islamic chaplaincy at Bayan Islamic Graduate School. Sondos is the author of the award-winning book Musings of a Muslim Chaplain, which was released in 2020, and a co-editor of the anthology Mantle of Mercy, Islamic Chaplaincy in North America, which was released in 2022. So thank you, Sondos, again for being here today, and excited to hear what you have to share.
Jazakallah khair, Zainab. Thank you so much for having me. It is my honor and such a blessing to be sharing space with all of you, our wonderful wisdom carriers of the community, mashallah. Let me see if my share is going to work. I'll test that out first. That's a bit off, isn't it? Okay. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Okay. So we begin today on our topic. I'll jump right in of spiritual health. And just to get a sense from everybody in the room, if you want to go ahead and utilize the chat function, the chat box, and if you want to throw in maybe a few words or a sentence of what spiritual health means to you. What do we mean when we say spiritual health? Oh, that's beautiful. Somebody says sukoon. Sukoon is like a tranquility, peace of mind. Contentment, sound heart and peace of mind. Yes, peace. Excellent. Sorry, my screen is all over the place here. Okay, so just as everybody identified, subhanAllah, there's something really, really important to all of us as just human beings that God, the Creator, has put inside us to be able to have a balance, to be able to find an equilibrium. Because as we all know, life throws our way many different tests and trials and difficulties. And there's something that we need in order to anchor ourselves. If we think of it as like being in a storm, we need something that's going to anchor us. And just like our mental health that we talk about a lot and our physical health to gain our strength, our spiritual health is a very, very important part and component of our entire well-being, this holistic well-being. I would argue it is the most important. Zainab mentioned that I work in the hospital or have worked in the hospital setting for many years, and I can say that the connection, which I'm sure many of you have either studied or just know experientially, the connection between the body and the soul, the body, the mind, and the soul is very, very strong. There's something about having a deep spiritual anchor, or a strong spiritual anchor rather, that actually dictates the health of your body and your mind. And so, for example, we know that in research, when they track different populations in the hospital, it shows that those who have strong faith and those who have spirituality have overall better health in terms of lower blood pressure, better immune function, and improved recovery from illness. So in other words, if somebody is stricken with some kind of illness, may God heal all of our loved ones and protect us, inshallah, ameen. There's something about having a spiritual outlook or a spiritual anchor that actually contributes to the physical healing of our bodies, subhanAllah. Practices like gratitude, like patience through difficulty will physically lower your stress and contribute to your overall well-being. And I've seen this on the flip side. I've sat with patients who have a spiritual or religious outlook regarding the difficulty or the disease that they're going through, and they have overall a better trajectory of healing. And I've sat with patients who have, unfortunately, no sort of spiritual anchor or religious direction. And once you lack that, then mentally your brain starts spiraling in really negative thoughts, and that has an effect on the body, and they end up being in the hospital for longer, subhanAllah. So I invite us all to think about this idea of aging generally, right? All of us in the room are thinking about it in some way, shape, or form. And right now there's a trend talking about positive aging. And I really like this when we think about positive aging versus something like successful aging, because aging is going to look different for each and every one of us. And we don't want to necessarily put qualifiers on, better physical health necessarily means that you're aging successfully, because somebody could have good health, but they might have or lack a strong spiritual anchor or heart. And as I said, I would argue that that's probably the most important component. So when we think about this idea of positive aging, there are three broad categories that I want us to think about when it comes to our spiritual anchor. Okay, so the first one that we want to think about is the need for purpose and meaning in life. And this is something that is the key definition when we talk about spirituality and spiritual health. And I'll go into each of these, inshallah, briefly. The second one is for need for hope and peace, which are two words that many of you named in the very beginning with the question, what does spiritual health mean for you? So definitely that one's on point. And the third category is a sense of belonging and connectedness. So let's go through each of these very quickly. And as I'm going through them, I want you to think about it, what these comprise of, and if there's anything that you think is missing. Right? So the first one, when we talk about the need for meaning and purpose, this is the first factor of spiritual health. We all know that things are going to happen to us in life, right? All of us have lived long enough to experience difficulty, loss, hardship, etc. There's something about having a sense of why these things happen to us that gives us, or that is connected to, a sense of overall peace. So taking time to reflect on our life. So if we can do that and take just 30 seconds to a minute and just think, they call this life review. Like, go back to the earliest childhood memory that you have and start almost viewing your life almost as if it's like a film or a movie. The ups and the downs and everything in between, the highs and the lows, the positives, the challenges. If you can go back through this movie or this film of your life and find significance in every single moment, whether we term it positive or term it negative, in the sense where you come all the way up to the present and you look back and you say, no regrets, right? There's something really powerful about being able to go back into your memories and look at your life and say, for example, everything happened for a reason, or I see a purpose in every single curve and twist in my life that I never expected or I never planned on. Okay, so spirituality encompasses this idea of having beliefs, of having this compass, which is like in this picture, and a lens through which we understand and we interpret and we evaluate our experiences in the world that contribute to the sense of meaning and purpose. So when we go back to the research shows that there is a correlation between somebody having a strong sense of spirituality and beliefs and actually reduced depression and anxiety. And this makes sense because spirituality provides that source of strength and support in difficult times. So when something happens to us, and I've seen this again come up in the hospital so many times, that we can be able to look back, or even in the moment, right? In the moment of trial, that we have that moment of patience and understanding and say, this is something beyond my control. There's a wisdom that's happening that is beyond my understanding, and there's a level of acceptance and surrender to that. And that all contributes to this sense of peace. Okay, so we have that element of purpose. The second one is equally as important. I'm sorry, with meaning. The second one of purpose is equally as important, that we continue to identify a purpose in our life as a child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, as an older adult, and as an older adult.
Oh,
That
so true. That was
even as our roles change in life, even as our activity levels change in life, that in every day we can see that our life here has a purpose. Okay. And as Muslims, we are immensely blessed in having God just tell us what our purpose is in life, which is to worship and to know Him. And what's really beautiful about this belief that we as human beings have this unique and meaningful purpose in life, which is to worship and to know Allah and God, is that we can do it in health, we can do it in sickness, we can do it in young age, we can do it in old age. At every moment in our life, we can find a way in order to connect with our Creator. Just being able to do that gives us a sense of purpose. I'm reminded of patients who I sat with who have no belief system, who perhaps lack spiritual health or haven't had the time to really strengthen their spiritual health, that when they get to a point where they lack mobility or they lose some sort of function in their body, they swing sort of to the other side and say, I don't have any purpose in my life anymore. I can't work anymore. I used to be able to volunteer with so many organizations, and that's what gave them their fulfillment in life. And now that they're, in the hospital or bedridden or whatnot, and say, I don't have anything to live for anymore. Like I can't work, I can't volunteer, I can't serve people, I can't do all the things that I think give me this meaning and this purpose and this value, and therefore what's life worth to live? And like I said, that spiritual outlook on life then affects the brain. It gives us spirals in that negative thought process. And then the body just gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And they say, I'm done. I just want to pass on. Right. So there's a really, really beautiful correlation between knowing what one's purpose is and having that be unchangeable, absolutely strong, no matter what changes in our physical or our daily lives. The second category that's really important for our spiritual health is everything that you all identified in the beginning, this idea of hope and peace. So those two are connected. When we have meaning in our life, when we can look back at our life and say, at every moment, there's a reason why this happened, and there's a greater path and decree that is unfolding for me, and that I am surrendered to that because there's a creator God that's taking care of me and making sure all of these are aligning for me, that gives us a sense of peace. And again, when we know that we are created for something much higher, that we have a purpose that we can live into no matter what our physical or our sort of real circumstances are, that we are to worship God, that we are to connect with Him, that is our value, that is where our purpose lies, that gives us a sense of hope. Because no matter what we are doing, no matter what happens to us, as long as we can fulfill that basic purpose, then that's all we need, and that's what we cling to. So this is all centered around this idea of having a positive mindset. And I think there's no coincidence that when we look at the word Islam, the name of my faith and many of you in the room, I don't know if there's anybody who's not Muslim here, but I'm going to be speaking from the Islamic perspective only because that's my own faith tradition. Islam comes from this root word that shares the silim, that shares a word in salam, which means peace, and also istislam, which is sort of like a surrendering. And so to me, the idea of Islam as a faith, or the name of our faith, is a inner peace that is achieved by surrendering to God's will. So this idea of we trust in God, we trust in this higher power that cares for us and journeys with us, and that we are constantly connected to. And that in and of itself gives us this sense of hope and peace. It's an anchor. The third category and final category, generally, when we're speaking about spiritual health, is this idea of belonging and connectedness. So a lot of research shows that those who participate in faith communities and religious communities actually have better health and more positivity and just better overall well-being. So when we are connected to a group of people who share our values and share our outlook on life, very much like Olive Community is one faith community or a group that can offer this for us. When you go to a space where you feel like people understand you, people get you. You don't have to explain much. You don't have to put on any pretenses. You can just show up and be who you are and feel understood and feel seen. That this is a great, great, great blessing and gift. And it is so incredibly important to have this outlet. And this will change in the different seasons of our lives. So if you think about the communities that you have gone through, again, since childhood, perhaps you found it in school, perhaps you found it in your neighborhood kids or your extended family. And as you move through high school and college and different clubs and different activities that you participate in, and then maybe workspaces, maybe mothering groups, family groups that come together, right? Up until this present day, it is so important to have some group that you could be connected to where you feel like you belong and that you are connected to other people. The connection piece, I also want to say, is not just horizontal, but it's also vertical. It's very, very important for our spiritual health. Very, very obviously, is to be connected to a higher power. And for us as Muslims, that means belief in Allah and connection to Allah, and that provides a comfort and a guidance. There was a study that explored the thoughts and the theories of older adults and middle-aged adults in Hong Kong. And I thought this was interesting because in Hong Kong, this research study said that positive aging for this group meant maintaining relationships. And because we share similarities with more of the Asian or the Eastern traditions, I thought this would be particularly resonant for the rest of us as well, from all the different backgrounds that we come from. Having good family support and social support and being able to be active in a community or a number of communities is going to contribute to our overall holistic health, and especially spiritual health when we're talking about a faith community. And one of the aspects of my work is participating in community chaplaincy. And what's really interesting is every facet of chaplaincy, like every context that you're in, the issues that you're going to be presented with change. So in the hospital, it's pretty clear it's going to be, sickness and disease and struggling with understanding why diagnoses happen, why we get sick, who heals, who doesn't heal, and then obviously end of life and death. In community chaplaincy, 99.9% of the issues that are coming to community chaplains is about relationships. And you start to wonder, okay, I'm a chaplain and we talk a lot about spirituality and religion. Why are people coming to chaplains and wanting to talk about their marriage issues? I'm not a marriage counselor. Why are they coming to chaplains, community chaplains, and talking about, sibling rivalry or issues with friends or issues with parents or issues with children? Right? These are not on the surface. This doesn't really have anything to do with religion or spirituality, but in a way it really does, because the relationships and the health that we have of our relationships, whether they're healthy or unhealthy, is going to have a profound impact on the way that we connect and see and experience our Creator. And there are so many studies that are coming out now talking just about how we were parented. So we as children, how we experienced our mother and our father, and how that actually maps onto the way that we experience and interact with God. So there's a real connection there, again, around feeling belonging and connectedness to people in our worldly life, and the impact that that will have on our spiritual health. So those who feel disconnected from a community, who don't feel understood, who don't feel seen, who have broken relationships, who don't speak to their family members, who don't speak to their children, who don't speak to their parents, etc., this is going to impact your spiritual health, subhanAllah. So these are some things that we want to think about, and sort of all of this information that I'm providing for you right now is just an invitation for all of us to sit back and think about the three categories and where we are for ourselves, and be able to rate our own spiritual health. When we think about meaning and purpose, can we look back at our life and do the life review and be able to feel peace around the way that things went, whether it was the way that we expected them to or not? And when we think about hope and peace, do we feel like we have a sense of acceptance of even in challenging situations, and this trust in a higher power to be able to surrender all of that to God or to the higher power? And lastly, this idea of belonging, connectedness. Do we have a community that we feel connected to? How are our relationships in our families and with our friends and extended families and community and so on? And how is that impacting then the way that we can connect to God? So I'm going to pause here for a second. And if you want to, again, utilize the chat box, is there anything that you would add to those three categories of needs for spiritual health? So this is information that was collected over like a series of studies of different communities and groups of different ages. Is there anything that you think is missing in terms of spiritual needs for good spiritual health? And the reason I ask this is because I don't think enough research is being done on our communities, and specifically our faith community. As Muslims, how would you tweak this, or how is this pretty complete? Do you feel like nothing is missing, or is something missing? And I'm not looking for a right or wrong answer, by the way. This is just an invitation, again, to sort of open the discussion and to make this feel like we own the material, and there's a sense of connection to it. Does this ring true for everybody in the space today? Does this pretty much cover the needs of our spiritual health, or do you think something is missing? I'll give just a few seconds to think. Oh, that's a great one. A need for learning and education. I agree. At first glance, Amina, I was thinking, okay, learning and education might be like more mental health and like mental stimulation. But in our faith tradition, learning and education is lifelong, and that could be about anything, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be about religion, but just having that that connection to knowledge is absolutely important for our spiritual health. Really, 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 really great point, mashallah. When you see what has happened in Gaza and what is happening in the world in the US, it's very disheartening and places a dent in spirituality. Absolutely. Absolutely. For all of us, right? From children who are asking really deep questions of the images that they're seeing, all the way through. And this is the idea that we're exploring, right? When we talk about meaning and purpose in life, it's not just, and this is a really great point, not just meaning and purpose of the challenges that we personally face, but the meaning and purpose of the challenges that we see other people facing, whether they're in our own inner circle or across the world. We should see groups like Olive or similar to maintain that connectedness. Absolutely. There's so many times where Olive has come up in conversation, and many people have echoed that it has been a really important outlet for them or for their loved ones. So may Allah bless Zainab and all of those who are working tirelessly to keep this programming running. And we need more and more groups like this. Because all of us, I think, know somebody in our age group that does not have a group like this or does not feel connected to community, that feels very isolated, that feels very alone. And we can see the impact that that has on their mental, physical, and spiritual health, subhanAllah. Having purpose and encouraging others to have purpose. Yes, absolutely. Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. Communication is the key with at least one person to open your heart. Yes, that's right. Community can look like 2 people or 200 people. Sometimes all you need is that one person who's absolutely going to understand you and that you can be completely yourself in front of. And that's the key to your spiritual health or to overall health. Absolutely. Yes, encouraging others to have a purpose. Just reminding each other. Interestingly, really interestingly, just as a side note, I do a lot of reading on like end of life and bioethical issues. And there's a fantastic physician and ethicist named Dr. Asim Padella. Some of you might have heard from him. He might be a really good person to talk to, by the way, or to invite into for a talk. But he does a lot of research around the idea of like at what point, right, at what point do we understand that it's time for us to leave this world, because medical interventions and medical technology has pushed that line so far out that now there's blurring, right, between like life and death, and people are hanging sort of in the middle. And the piece that he's identified, especially for our faith tradition and for the Muslim community, is this idea of taklif, that we come into taklif, or this like moral accountability, as you know, at puberty or as teenagers. And then when does that end? At the point where we can no longer fulfill our purpose and worshiping Allah. So if we are in a coma, or we have, you know, no ability, no cognitive ability to be able to connect to our Creator, that's a point where we can start thinking and evaluating, you know, next steps in terms of the transitioning. But it's this idea of like living into our purpose of worshiping Allah takes on really, really significant meanings in our life. Focusing on the positives of life. Going back to what somebody said, finding contentment regardless of circumstances. Yes. So that I would probably categorize that under a meaning in life, finding the meaning in life, and that contributes to our positive outlook or our negative outlook, right? Which is something that we want to stay away from. So absolutely, I am actually going to add a couple of those. The need for learning knowledge was one of them. And then the other ones I think generally fall under these categories. And the communication. Okay, excellent. Thank you. You're helping to further research, mashallah. All right, moving on really quickly, because I do want to save time for discussion and some question answer. So the good news is that all the studies say that our elders, our older adults, have actually the greatest religious affiliation of all the age groups. But at the same time, there are very unique challenges to spiritual health that are experienced by this specific age group. These could include the loss of loved ones. So When we live long enough, that means that we also attend many, many funerals. And when we experience loss of loved ones and we experience profound grief and like layered grief, grief on top of grief, on top of grief, on top of grief, that this could challenge perhaps our existing beliefs as a faith community. It could, as somebody mentioned, all of us have been going through attending sort of 1,000, more like 50,000 virtual funerals of our shuhada and martyrs in Gaza and Palestine over the past year and a half. And what does that do then to the beliefs that we once held? I don't have the exact verse memorized, forgive me, but in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala even poses sort of a rhetorical question to say, did you not think that tests and trials and hardship are going to manifest in this world as a way to test the believers? Because there's one thing of like knowing a piece of information out of a book and reading it and saying, oh yeah, that sounds good, I believe that. And it's and another entirely thing to experience something where we have an opportunity to apply that belief and we have a choice to do it, or we struggle with it to say, I don't know how to apply this anymore. I don't know if I can understand that, everything happens for a reason. What's the reason behind this particular thing? So loss of loved ones is a unique challenge to older adults for spiritual health, that it might diminish spiritual health. So we want to look out for that for ourselves. Another one is health decline. Obviously, physical limitations are going to restrict access to the masjid, to Jummah, to other religious programming and services or spiritual activities that we have. For example, going on Hajj or Umrah, or being able to fast, or being able to pray the way that we used to, right? That just physically, subhanAllah, the way that our bodies will decline eventually, that this is going to have an impact perhaps on our spiritual health. So this is another unique challenge. The third unique challenge that's identified for older adults in terms of spiritual health, and I bring these up just for us to be aware of like what we can achieve and also what we might have to, what the obstacles in which we might have to creatively divert through or navigate through in order to be able to achieve the best potential of our own spiritual health. The third one is social isolation. And this could happen for many reasons. There could be a change in location. Maybe somebody moves at a very later stage in their life, and they're suddenly disconnected from the groups and the people and the family members that they were once connected to. And find themselves in a very isolating situation, or somebody in their family becomes ill and you become, or somebody else becomes a caregiver for that person, and that becomes 24/7, and there is suddenly no more time to be able to connect in the way that you used to with community. Or communicate with that like one person and just have that chat one-on-one. There's just no time to do it. So there's so many different reasons for this, but social isolation is also something that might come up as a unique challenge for older adults towards spiritual health. So again, we want to be aware of these challenges and want to identify the obstacles so that we can learn to navigate and say, okay, this is something that I have to deal with that's new, but my ultimate goal and aim is to maintain and preserve my spiritual health. And so I'm going to find any way possible in order to restore that. So how do we restore, or how do we achieve the best potential of our strongest spiritual health that we can? I want to offer two practical ways. And there are many, many things you could do under these, but let's just try and simplify it. And again, I'm going to open this up and see if there's anything that's worked for you that you can add on to this. I would really, really love to hear from you. The two that I'm going to offer in terms of practical tips are, number one is know your why. Know your why. And for Muslims, this means really understanding our aqidah, our beliefs. Okay. And we'll go into each one in a minute, but this is know your why. And this is sort of like this picture of the frame looking out into the world. What is the way that you're viewing everything that's happening in the world? What is your framework for it? What are your lens? That's really, really important for spiritual health. And the second one is this piece around connection. And you guys have already identified this many, many times. But connection will come into two parts. How do we connect with people, right? That horizontal plane that I was talking about. And also, how do we connect to Allah Ta'ala? So the first one is this idea of knowing our why, having our beliefs correct and straight, and have firm conviction in these beliefs. When we have positive spirituality, when we have conviction in our beliefs, this could help mitigate feelings of helplessness and loss of control when we experience challenges in our life. This in turn will reduce our stress and increase our overall mental health and our physical health, and just restores the sense of purpose and meaning in our life. What I mean by know your why is what we call or term in chaplaincy your theology of suffering. So these sort of like these bigger questions that we all hold at some point in our life. Why does evil exist in the world? Why do bad things happen to really good people? Why do some people get to live very easy lives, it looks like, while others have to really, really struggle? Why do we have to experience pain? These are all sort of bigger questions that we might look back at our own lives or look at the lives of others, either in our inner circle or beyond in our global ummah, in our global community and family, and ask these sort of questions. And if we don't have answers to these questions that we have researched, that we have asked about, that we have reflected upon, that we have contemplated, and we have reached a sense of peace around, this can really, really wreak havoc on our spiritual health and the way that we then undergo and experience challenges and trials and tests in this life. So when we go through hardship, or we see somebody else go through hardship, and we can't make sense out of why that's happening, this is a sign that might be something worth working on in order for us to attain a higher level of, or a better spiritual health, stronger spiritual health. And if you're curious about this process, I have found the story in chapter 18 of the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, which interestingly we are encouraged to read every week, not only for the blessings and the barakah of the recitation, but there are deep life lessons in many of the stories that are interspersed in that chapter. But one of them is of Musa, of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and Al-Khidr, which is this righteous servant, sort of a mysterious man, who becomes Musa's teacher, alayhi salam, and they travel through the three different sort of points in their journey where something seemingly terrible and disastrous happens, and at the very end, then Al-Khidr, teaches Musa alayhi salam the deeper meaning behind it, or perhaps the purpose behind it, the wisdom behind it, whatever we want to call it, the meaning, let's say the meaning of it. And that Musa asked that question, why? Why did this happen? How could this happen? So-and-so was innocent. These people were good, etc., etc. And that sort of exchange, I think, is something that all of us can benefit from reading and rereading and thinking about how it applies in our own circumstances. And Allah Ta'ala in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, in chapter 2, verse 155, promises us. He says, and we, royal we, referring to Allah, will indeed test you with something of fear of and hunger and loss of wealth, souls, and possessions. This idea that we will all experience loss and hardship and grief universally, no matter what our background is, what language we speak, what religion we ascribe to, etc., etc. Every single one of us is going to go through this earthly experience with something of fear and hunger and loss. But not everything needs to be a trauma, and not everything is a crisis. So Allah Ta'ala completes that very same ayah with saying, and give glad tidings to the patient. So there's something about this idea of enduring hardship with patience, with trust. And there's this implication to say patience, to say this might be a long process, right? That we need a way to replenish. We need a way to be able to see everything that's happening through a specific lens and be able to be patient with it. The second piece that I will offer is this kind of practical tip. Once we get our beliefs in order and we have deep conviction about it and we correct the lens, maybe we need to adjust. Maybe, things that have happened in the last year or 2 or 3 or 5 years, either to us personally or around the world that we've seen, has impacted our, what do you call it, like the measurements on the lens, the prescription, right? The prescription on our lens, that maybe we need to adjust. Maybe we need a bit stronger lens now. Things are a little bit fuzzy. We need to go back and up the prescription or adjust the prescription. And what I mean by that symbolically is just perhaps finding a teacher, finding a sheikh, a religious instructor, somebody who you can go, who you feel understands you. It can ask those deeper questions and be able to sort out and figure out and reflect upon, where do I need to make sense and make meaning out of what is happening. Okay, so adjusting that for our spiritual health. The second piece, very quickly, is idea of connection. And like I said, connection horizontally and vertically. So we'll do horizontally first. Our relationships. And I know this might be a sensitive topic for all of us because all of us have that one person or a couple of people or maybe 5 people or 12 people in our life that are a test for us. And this is something also that comes up in the Quran, and forgive me, I don't have it memorized, but this idea of, yes, there are people that Allah puts in our life as a test. Not just experiences and things that happen around us, but people who are put in our paths, who we are meant to learn from, or who are to show us perhaps the parts of our lower self that we don't necessarily really want to see or to accept that are a part of us, but it is. And that's an opportunity for us to clean and to work on that. So what are the practices that we are pursuing that's going to help clean out our spiritual heart? Because in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu, where he says, there's a part of the body that when it is sound, the rest of the body is sound. And somebody, again, at the very beginning mentioned this idea of like a tranquil or peaceful heart. It's the heart, the spiritual heart. And so Ramadan is coming up in 2 weeks, this month of fasting, this month of emptying, of cleansing in many different ways, physically, mentally, spiritually. It is an annual invitation to all of us to evaluate our relationships in this life and get ourselves to a point where we can forgive and let go. And this idea of forgiveness is part and parcel to spiritual health. And I'm reminded of the story in a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, where there's, in essence, like a man who is identified by the Prophet ﷺ as somebody who is going to heaven. Like heaven is written for him. And so a companion is so curious and says, what is it about this person that's so special? Why does he get to go to heaven? I don't see that he's like, he really doesn't do much. So he asks to follow the man. And the story goes that he sits with him for 3 days. And he sees him just, prays the 5 prayers and does the daily things, doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. And finally, after 3 days of trying to identify what is special about this man, he asks him, that you've been identified as somebody who's, accepted into heaven. Can you tell me what it is that you do? And the man essentially says, every night before I go to bed, I release my heart of any grudges and just forgive everybody. And I go to sleep with a sound and tranquil heart. And so there's that inner work that needs to be done on top of our outer, fasting and prayers and these things that we can see, and then we can sort of quantify and say, okay, how many prayers did I do today? But there's something equally, if not more important, of the inner work that needs to be done, which is arguably much, much, much harder. Nobody's going to see the work being done, and they're probably not going to acknowledge it or appreciate it, but this is going to contribute to our spiritual health. When our relationships here are intact, when there's a peace on this plane, there's an increased peace on the vertical plane. And so I'll say that God is so merciful that he does not just send us tests and trials and difficulties and everyone's going to go through loss, and then it kind of makes us think like, oh my gosh, this is so much. He also equips us exactly with what we need in order to have the best spiritual health. It is built into our tradition as Muslims. And again, I'm sorry, I'm speaking from the perspective of Islam because this is what I know. He prescribes these rituals because he knows they're medicinal and we need them for our spiritual heart, for our diseases of the heart. And these are the 5 pillars. I'm going to just simplify it and say there's so much in the 5 pillars of Islam that we can learn from 2 aspects. Number 1, connection, this idea of connection and community, the sense of belonging. And number 2, this idea of emptying, emptying, emptying. So let's go through them like really quickly. When you think about salah, there's an emptying aspect, like we're just surrendering everything to Allah once we get on that janumaz or prayer mat. And there's a sense of community, because how many times are we encouraged to pray in jama'ah, in congregation? There's something really powerful about standing in line with our brothers and sisters in a grand room and everybody doing the same thing at the same time. This actually contributes to our well-being. The fasting, which is an emptying, again, we talked about in many different ways, and we do it in community. When we break our fast, like how wonderful, the best aspect of Ramadan, arguably, is the iftar, not just because of the food, but because of the connections that we make and the relationships that we contribute to after a day of fasting and emptying and doing that on our own. Zakat at the same time, charity or almsgiving, this idea of emptying our funds and our wealth in order to maintain socioeconomic equality and equity in our community. Again, this idea of Hajj, emptying. We are forgiven of sins. We are purified after the experience, but we do it in groups. We do it with the entire ummah. We do it with millions of Muslims from around the world. Okay, and the last one is the Shahada, or the declaration of faith. There is a La ilaha illallah. There is an emptying before the affirming. There's a negating before the affirming. We say there is no God. We have to empty and clean our slate of that before we can say, except the one God, Allah Ta'ala. And we also do that in community. How many people have come into the faith, and there need to be witnesses. There need to be people, other people there who witness and bear witness to the person coming into the faith. So again, the idea of just the 5 pillars of Islam. And I'll close with a bit more of like practical points. Just by a show of hands, let me see if I can see everybody here. How many have heard of the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman? Okay, some of you. So it's this theory, this idea. Yes, thank you, Imam Azim. Yes, thank you for all of those. Sorry, I haven't been able to see the chat. So this theory that's posited by Gary Chapman, who talks about the different ways that we show love to people and that we receive love. So I want us to think about it again in terms of our relationships with those in our life and our vertical relationship with Allah Ta'ala. When we're thinking about how we receive love, each of us, I'm going to do this one really quickly. So the sort of secular model of love languages is each person receives and gives love in a different way. Okay, so the love languages that he identifies are 5 words of affirmation. So if you're somebody who needs to be told, I love you, or you're wonderful, or you're so important to me every day, and that's sort of the way that you feel loved by somebody, and that's the way that you give love to other people. So when you want to show love to somebody, you choose words of affirmation, then that is your love language. Okay. Another one is acts of service. If you feel most loved when somebody is emptying the dishwasher or taking your dry cleaning or driving you somewhere or picking up something for you. And when you want to show love, that's the first thing that you gravitate towards is acts of service, then that's your love language. Quality time. If the way that you feel loved by somebody is that they empty out their whole afternoon and say, I'm yours for 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours, 8 hours. And when you want to show love, that's what you do for somebody, you just spend time with them, then that's your love language. Okay, physical touch, hugs and kisses and cuddles, If this is the way that you give love when you want to show somebody love, or that when somebody gives that to you, that you feel the most love, then that is your love language. And finally, gifts. If you're somebody who always has her purse or pockets filled with, candies or change or little gifts, and that's how you tell people that you love them or that they're important to you. Or also conversely, when you receive a gift, that's when you feel like super seen and loved, then that's your love language. And what's important to identify here is not just the way that you feel love, but to understand that people in your family or people in your community, people in your extended family, your friends, might speak a different language than you. So you might be giving somebody gifts and gifts and gifts and gifts, but their love language is words of affirmation, and you haven't told them in a really long time that you love them or that they're really important to you or that you appreciate them. All the gifts you're giving is nice, and I'm sure they're appreciating it, but it's not gonna really like touch them the way that words of affirmation that they're really craving. And so it's somewhat upon us to figure out what are my kids' love languages. Each one's going to have a different one. My spouse, my friends, my community members, my siblings, et cetera, and learn to speak other people's love languages and start to repair our relationships and bring us closer together. And what I'm going to offer is also the way that we love each other can be different. The way each of us connects to our Creator is also unique and special. And I will say that the 5 pillars of Islam is an invitation by Allah and an acknowledgement, in fact, that He created each one of us uniquely and differently, and that each one of us will feel a sense of connection to Allah or to our Creator more when we're doing one thing than the other. And so when you are renewing your Shahada, every day, whether it's in prayer, whether it's just to yourself, whether it's facilitating a ritual for somebody else, whether it's at end of life or at birth or somebody coming into Islam, if that's a moment where that really brings you to tears and lifts your spirit, then maybe there's something around words of affirmation as your love language, your spiritual love language, right? And so words of affirmation in spirituality, you can think of dhikr, you can think of Quran, you can think of these other words or verbal ways that you feel connected. Acts of service, I'll say maybe Hajj will be one of them, that there are these rituals and this labbaik Allahumma labbaik, this idea of like, oh Allah, I'm coming as your servant and your slave to your place and to fulfill all of the things that you've asked me to fulfill. And I'm doing this for you and for your sake only, and I'm sacrificing everything else. Maybe that's the moment that really makes us feel connected. So something about Umrah or traveling or sacrificing for Allah that's going to replenish our spiritual health. Quality time. Maybe there's something about the prayer, the salah, the taking 5 times a day to sit in quiet reflection and connecting to our Lord. That idea of salah being sila, literally a link or a connection, that's the way that we feel connected to God the most. Physical touch, I offer that as like fasting, because we physically feel and experience the fasting and the empty stomach. Is that some way is there something around maybe that physical hardship that makes us feel more connected to God? And lastly, gifts, zakah, when we're giving in sadaqah, when we're giving in charity, when we're doing this annual sort of purifying and cleansing of our funds and helping other people, is this something that contributes to our spiritual health? So for each of us, I invite you to find your connection point. Find the 1 or 2 or 3 things that contribute to your spiritual health, that make you feel connected. That's your strength. That's how Allah has created you. And then also identify places where you don't feel as connected, and then think about ways in which you can strengthen them. And again, just a reminder that Ramadan is coming up. It is our highlight of the year, a spiritual boot camp. Whether we are fasting or not fasting, it doesn't it will not take away, inshallah, from our potential to reach our highest levels of spiritual health. As you can see, there's so many other ways that we can connect. And above all, thinking about our lateral, that horizontal relationships, forgiving other people, letting go of grudges, and inshallah, that will fortify and strengthen our vertical relationship. I'm sorry, I took all the time and I just jabbered, but I would love to open it up just for a couple of minutes even.
Yes, thank you so much, Chaplain Sondos. We have time for just maybe 2 or 3 questions. If you guys can keep the comments minimal and just ask away, unmute yourself and you can ask. Be happy to, Sondos would be happy to. We have literally a couple of minutes left, so.
I know.
Uh,
A quick question. What are some of the things that you can do to increase concentration in Salah?
That's a really big question, mashallah. It's almost like anything that you want to train in any other aspect of your life, it takes commitment and an awareness. So if there's a sort of beginning awareness that this is something that one wants to work on for themselves, then it's a matter of identifying what are the things that are distracting you from focusing, and then working on eliminating those. But at the same time, one of the most beautiful advices that I've been given from my teachers is evaluating the quality of our wudu and our ritual purification before going into prayer or an act of worship, that there's a correlation there. So if you want to be able to focus more in Salah or in, reading the Quran or whatnot, that the focus begins actually a step before that in how we're preparing for it, and that is with the ritual cleansing. And so one piece of advice that I would offer that's helped is focus in your wudu and pay attention to slowing that down and doing that really intentionally, and see how that will affect, inshallah, the other act of worship that comes after.
Nisha, go ahead.
My question to you is, Sister Rubina's answer to that question also. Would the meditation help? Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's not like it's not religious aspect, but you are concentrating on your breath and your state of mind. If you do that, that gives you the tranquility and just focus on what you want to. I mean, you're focusing on your breath in and out and coming. So would that help?
Sounds like it would, inshallah. I've never experienced it personally, but it sounds beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
All right, we are at 12:01. Thank you so much again, Sundus, for your time, and everyone else. I hope you found this session beneficial. I myself work at a hospital, and they always have spiritual care. So even the doctors recognize the need for this service or this aspect of help. So please have a good mindful day today. You'll be in the best mindset. What a great way to start your Monday. A mindful Monday for you all. Have a good, safe rest of the afternoon. Thank you again. Thank you, Sundas. And we'll see you at another time.
Thank you. Thank you, Zainab, and thank you, Sundas.
Olive Community Services is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Southern California that provides culturally appropriate services to seniors, their family, and the community. Through its physical and virtual interactive programs, Olive engages participants in a variety of ways that promotes health and well-being. To learn more about Olive Community Services, to get involved, or to make a donation, please visit www.olivecs.org or email info@olivecs.org. Be a change maker, and together, let's live, learn, and thrive.